every morning with drive. Being on the grind, know I had to survive. We had to win. Started from the dirt and the rubble. I had to be the needle that was popping your bubble.
Hello and welcome into the Rookie Prospect Profile Series, a Zilla Fantasy Elite production. Today, we're going to be looking at Rome Odunze in the rookie wide receiver machine learning models. Rome Odunze was drafted number 9 overall in the NFL draft by the Chicago Bears. They come into the league out of Washington University. Rome Odunze comes in at a very healthy 6'3", 212 pounds, ran a 4.45 in the 40-yard dash, 39-inch vertical, and was very, very good in the agility drills. So this guy is a size speed specimen, agility not a concern. Everything that I hear about him, he can run the entire route tree, very good route runner, can go all over the field, doesn't need to be just outside or just in the slot. He can do anything. So can Rome Odunze live up to the hype, or will they disappoint in our fantasy evaluation here at Zilla Fantasy Elite? Discover the outcome as our machine learning models provide the final say. All right, let's now dive into Rome Odunze's first year predictions. Here we see him, minimum prediction there at 2.90 fantasy points per game, 8th best minimum in the class. The 10th and 25th percentiles are the 5th best in the class at 6.60 and 8.13 fantasy points per game. And the mean, median, 75th, 90th, and maximum predictions, all the 4th best in the class for year 1. Kind of in range with what we expected. Rome Odunze, highly drafted. He should be one of the best in the class. He's coming in at 4th, which might be a little low for some people thinking, hey, he could have been the best in the class. Well, according to the machine learning model, this is what we're seeing, number 4. The mean and median for him hovering right around 10 points, so 9.92 and 9.94 fantasy points per game. 75th percentile and 90th at 11.8 and 13.29. Then he maxes out at 16.13. Standard deviation was the highest in the class at 40, giving his CV at 25.6%, the 13th best in the class. Not exactly what you want to see from a top 3 receiver in the class, a CV that's ranked 13th, but really just saying the model's not as confident in his outputs or maybe has a higher range of outcomes than some of the other players drafted around this range. Getting into some of those numbers, who's hanging around at a 10 fantasy points per game, mean or median in their first year. Just below that, we see guys like Jerry Jeudy, DJ Moore at 9.85, 9.8, Deontay Johnson, 9.8, George Pickens, 9.79. And then a little bit above that, 10.2, we have Marlon Brown, Hunter Renfrow at 10.3, Christian Kirk at 10.3, Aaron Dobson actually at 10.3, Kiki QT, and Devontae Parker at 10.4. So that's right in the range of Rome Odunze's first year predictions. That maximum prediction at 16.13. What does that look like? Well, that's exactly what Mike Evans had in his rookie season. It was actually top 6 value all time. Just above that, Michael Thomas at 17, 1 point per game below that. Brandon Ayuk in his rookie season, 15.38. Jalen Waddle's rookie season, 15.36. Tank Dell at 15 flat. That's kind of where it's saying his ceiling is at in year 1. Now diving into those year 2 numbers for Rome Odunze, we can see a little bit of improvement. He is number 4 again across the board for his rankings, except for that minimum is the 3rd best in the class. So went from 8th best to 3rd best. We see a little bit of improvement in that. But Rome Odunze, year 2, minimum prediction, 4.88 fantasy points per game. 10th and 25th percentiles, 8.29 and 9.63. Getting into the mean, we were hovering around 10 in year 1. Now in year 2, we're at 11.27 and 11.30. 75th and 90th percentile, 12.96 and 14.22. Net maximum output, 17.91. Again, most of those are 4th in the class for year 2, except for that minimum there at number 3. So really going from a year 1 where it's not quite as sure, ranking them a little bit lower on the low end, a decent amount on the high end. Now it's kind of getting them right in that number 4 spot across the board for year number 2. Standard deviation still at 2.27, one of the worst in the class, number 35 overall. But again, he's got higher numbers compared to most people in the class. That CV now at 20.1 is the 6th best in the class for year 2. Really, what does this mean? 11.2, 11.3 for his median output. We're looking at guys in their second year. Rondale Moore at 10.99, Mike Williams 11.1, Chase Claypool 11.11, Christian Watson 11.2, Will Fuller 11.3, Chris Godwin 11.4, Marquise Brown 11.44, right in that range for his median prediction. So you can kind of think of them in that end for the prospect profile. That max range 17.91, how does that stack up? Well, 17.91 would end up being the 6th best overall score in year 2 amongst any wide receivers in the last 11 draft classes anyway. So that 17.9, we have Juju Smith-Schuster just above it at 18.4, AJ Brown just below that at 17.68, DK Metcalf 16.96, Cooper Kupp 16.9, Sammy Watkins 16.8, Amon-Ra St. Brown more recently 16.73, kind of maxing out in a range like that to give you an idea of some of the prospects that he could look like. Let's get into the year 3 values. And this is where it really starts getting interesting for Rome Odunze in year 3. We see minimum prediction at 4.72, again, 3rd best in the class. But then we look at those rankings, 10th, 25th, 7 in the max ranking, all number 2 in the class, and then the mean median. He's got the best in the class with the average predictions in year 3, 75th and 90th percentile as well, number 1 in the class. So I wanted to take this into context with what we see in his draft. Again, draft capital is being taken into consideration, but not where they're drafted. The model doesn't know the team context, anything like that. But we know he went to a team that's got already really good receivers there. Chicago Bears, DJ Moore, they got Keenan Allen there. We're probably going to see Rome Odunze struggle for target competition there with guys like that on his team. And what is our model predicting? Again, it doesn't know any of this context, but it's saying, hey, in year 1, he could be one of the sitting there at 5, 8, somewhere like that on the bottom end. Number 4 in the class in terms of average outcome, max outcome. We see a little bit of improvement in year 2, but then in year 3, perhaps when these guys are long gone and he's now taking over, we see he's getting the best predictions in the class. So machine learning model doesn't know any of the context, but it sees his profile and says, hey, in year 3, I really think he's going to break out. We'll see, a little bit of improvement from year 1 to year 2. And then in year 3, we're going to see a big breakout. That's really what we're seeing in the machine learning model here. And even if you look at those graphs down there, we can see it's all skewed more towards the right, where the bulk of those things are coming with a tail end off to the left. So it's really the minor amount of stuff tailing off to the left is on the low end. And then we get a nice fat chunk towards the higher end of his profile in this case, which is why we see him up on the high end of the rankings in year 3 for those higher end outcomes. So what are those outcomes? 10th and 25th percentile, again, those are ranked number 2, 11.22 fantasy points and 13.11 fantasy points per game. His average, 14.58, 14.85, number 1 in the class for year 3, 75th and 90th percentile, number 1 as well. 16.43, 17.53 fantasy points per game. And then if you get any wide receiver scoring over 20 fantasy points per game in a season, you're going to be ecstatic. His maximum at 20.08 is the 2nd best in the class for year 3. So how confident is the model in this particular projection? Well, the standard deviation was 2.44. Again, that's one of the worst in the class or one of the biggest in the class, but he does have higher predictions, so that's to be expected. His CV, though, at 17.8%, it's the 2nd most confident in the entire year 3 outcomes in terms of coefficients of variance is pretty limited there, 2nd best in the class. So pretty confident in this year 3 outcome for Rome Odunze. And I think that's kind of how we should look at him in Dynasty. Year 1, maybe not going to be great. We should see an improvement into year 2. Maybe we still got Keenan Allen around, but he's old. He might be gone come year 3. He's really going to blossom into a full-fledged dynasty star maybe at that particular point, and we see him pop off. So what are these numbers? 14.5, 14.85 for his median. Who can we look at to say this is what he's going to look like just on an average basis, maybe better than that? So 14.5 and 14.85. Now these would probably be close, just over like top 20 all time in a year 3 at 14.5. We got guys, DK Metcalf, actually the 23rd best overall at 14.37. Jarvis Landry, 14.3. Devonta Smith, 14.23. Steph Diggs, 14.2 in their third season. A little bit above that, Will Fuller hit 15.2. Hunter Renfrow had that really good year 3. He hit 15.24. Devontae Adams, 15.3. Kenny Golladay, 15.5. Average prediction, it's getting in that particular range, which again, it's close to the top 20 all time in year 3 fantasy output. And getting into that maximum output, like I said, if you hit 20, you're going to be sitting pretty. And we actually have 6 wide receivers that have ever done that all time in their third season. That would be Justin Jefferson, Deebo Samuel, Amon-Ra St. Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyreek Hill, and Keenan Allen all touched that in their third season. His is just topping out there. So Keenan Allen at 20.2, oddly enough, on his team now. Tyreek Hill, 20.5. DeAndre Hopkins, 20.6. Those are the 4th, 5th, and 6th highest ever. Then just below that, Michael Thomas, year 3, 19.7. Chris Godwin, 19.6. Mike Evans, oddly enough, they're partners too, 18.8. Kelvin Ridley at 18.77. So maximum output, you can kind of think of it as a top 10 all time in fantasy output. And even as median outcome, like I said, it's probably top 25 all time in terms of year 3 fantasy output. Now diving into his year 4 predictions, what do those look like for Rome Odunze? As I said, kind of advancing all the way along into year 3. And then we come into year 4. We do see a slight decline here for his overall output into year 4, which isn't too uncommon. We know some of those big names had down years in year 4 for whatever reason, but the model does take that into consideration as its inputs, and it outputs what it thinks will happen. And again, because of that, we might see some lower overall mean and median predictions due to guys like DeAndre Hopkins having down years in their 4th season. Getting into Rome Odunze, 3.84 minimum prediction, 2nd best in the class, 10th percentile, 7.92 fantasy points per game, 3rd best in the class. Then he's 4 across the board in ranks for 25th, mean, median, 75th, and 90th percentile outcomes. Again, number 4 overall for those. What are those values? 9.52 for his 25th percentile outcome, mean and median at 11.53 and 11.42 respectively. And then that 75th and 90th at 13.41 and 15.39 fantasy points per game, getting back into the region of pretty good outcomes there. But again, all ranked number 4. And then his maximum output in year 4 is actually the best maximum output in the class at 21.54. As I had said before, anything over 20, you're sitting pretty. This is at 21.54, which is really good. Standard deviation, again, we see one of the worst in the class at 2.90. But that is because he does have one of the higher mean and median outcomes, and you can kind of expect the standard deviation to be a little bit higher when your numbers are a little bit higher like that. His CV, though, 25.2%, 6th in the class, means it's pretty confident in this result. What I really like is that it's viewing his maximum output as the highest in the class at 21.54. And if you think of his physical traits, how agile he is, jumps out the gym, big guy, I really kind of agree with him having, the highest maximum output of all 3 of these top 3 receivers in this class. So it kind of makes sense into year 4 that he would have this. So what do these numbers mean? For the mean and median, and then that max. Getting into those average ranges, right around 11.5 for the 4th season in the league. We actually have T. Higgins just below that at 11.47. Marquise Lee, 11.2. Deontay Johnson, 10.63. Just above that, we see Russell Gage at 11.64. Mecole Hardman, 11.73. Adam Humphries, we have at 11.8. Will Fuller, 12.2. So that's kind of the average prediction around that range. Just above that, we do see guys like Keenan Allen and DeAndre Hopkins on the upper 12% or upper 12 fantasy points per game range. Just to give you an idea, we've actually only had 3 wide receivers in their year 4 fantasy year break that 20-point barrier. That's pretty impressive. Like I said, we see a little decline in the overall fantasy output in year 4 for whatever reason. And that's why you're going to see some of these top end guys have a little bit of a decline in year 4 versus some maybe on the lower end, which you'll see have a higher year 4 compared to their first 3 seasons. The higher end output just isn't there in year 4 for whatever reason for the wide receivers, but in that range, 21, like we see with him, 21.54 would be the third best overall, just above Justin Jefferson in his 4th year, which was last year. Justin Jefferson at 20.22, Michael Thomas at 23.4, and CeeDee Lamb, top ever in year 4 at 23.72. It's actually a pretty big drop off down to Odell Beckham in his 4th season at 18.5. Another almost full point below that. A.J. Brown next best, 17.62. Steph Diggs, 17.6. And then another step down, Jarvis Landry, 16.2. So we just don't see that high end output in year 4 like we had in maybe year 2 or year 3, which is probably why we see a little bit of a decline. But that maximum output still saying it could be one of the top 3 ever all time, which is probably a good enough reason for you to take Rome Odunze in some of your rookie drafts. So hopefully you gained a little bit of knowledge about Rome Odunze and his profile. Again, we see that steady kind of increase from year 1 to year 2, and then that explosion in year 3. I really think, given his situation, that the machine learning model here probably really nailed his profile. We see him number 1 ceiling even into year 4. And really across the board, one of the best ones in year 3. So take that to the bank when you go into your fantasy drafts. I think he's going to be solid. You just might have to wait a year or 2 to get that production. All right, that's going to do it for today's rookie prospect profile on Rome Odunze, presented by Zilla Fantasy Elite. Thanks for tuning in.